Hey, y'all, Jared Sandler with you. Happy Wednesday. Talking some Cowboys today. And be sure to subscribe to this channel. I'd really, really appreciate it. It's free. All you have to do is click a button because later on today I'm going to have a conversation with Super Bowl winning scout, formerly with the Dallas Cowboys, Brian Broaddus, about a number of Cowboys issues. I've reached out to folks on various forms of social media to just figure out, hey, what are the things you want to hear about? I mean, we've talked so much about Dak and Jamal Adams ad nauseum. What about the other things? So going to cover some of those other things today. Some of those things have been covered in the past, but maybe some of you missed them or want a little bit of a refresher, and not necessarily covered by me, but covered by others. But listen, I want to serve the food that you want to eat. So just a reminder, we've also got our weekly Just Hanging with the Nosebleed Seats segment that will be released today. So got at least 3 pieces of content for you on this channel today. This right here, Brian Broaddus interview, and Just Hanging with the Nosebleed Seats. Hopefully, at least those 2 conversations will be interesting. I'm not sure if I myself am interesting, but I guess if you're here, then maybe you're at least giving me a chance, so I appreciate that. All right, so the 3 things I want to cover here right now, just going back over DeMarcus Lawrence's 2019, and I want to offer my thoughts on it, but also take a look at some objective pieces of analysis. Want to discuss CeeDee Lamb and how he can really help the Cowboys beyond just people saying, hey, this guy's awesome, he's going to help the Cowboys. In what ways, and how does he compare to maybe Randall Cobb and how the Cowboys used Randall Cobb, and also want to talk about Mike McCarthy and how Mike McCarthy fits and could help this Cowboys team, but also taking a look at maybe ways in which Mike McCarthy, kind of struggled in his final years in Green Bay. So we'll go over that. Let's start with DeMarcus Lawrence. So last year, DeMarcus Lawrence had 5.5 sacks. When you pay a guy as much money as you're paying DeMarcus Lawrence, that number in and of itself is not what you're aiming for. However, that number alone is not all that DeMarcus Lawrence brings to the table. Now let's get this out of the way. People last year did make it abundantly clear that for a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence, it's not all about the sacks. However, you don't just pay someone that type of money because he's a good run stopper off the edge. The sacks do matter. It's not the only stat that matters, but it is important. So while I think DeMarcus Lawrence was good last year, and maybe even really good, he wasn't as good last year as he had been in previous years. I think both of those things can be true. I don't think it has to be, he only had 5.5 sacks, he was bad, because he had way more sacks the previous couple years. I think both can be true. It was not his best year, but he was still good. He was still effective. And I would say he was still a top 10 overall edge. Because remember, in addition to sacking the quarterback, he's still great at getting pressures, and we'll detail that in a second. But as I mentioned earlier, he is still one of the best edges against the run. You got a lot of these pass rushers who are specialists, and they're great at going to get the quarterback, but they're not very good against the run. DeMarcus Lawrence is complete. He's also really good at identifying a screen that either originates from the backfield or maybe something from the slot. He's been really good over the past few years at playing the screen and not necessarily over-pursuing and making the Cowboys defensively, at least on his side, susceptible against the screen. I think those 2 things are important and significant. All right, for someone like DeMarcus Lawrence against the pass, though, and just in general, and not just against the pass, you got to look at tackles for loss. You got to look at QB hits. You got to look at hurries. You got to look at pressures. Those have to be evaluated because history shows that those metrics better illustrate pass rushing effectiveness than just sacks alone. And what those numbers show, listen, we've grown to hate the word process, but those are the process numbers that give you an idea whether that person's production is sustainable year after year. And while one year might be a little bit better than others, and last year fell into that others category, it's not, the good production is not a fluke if these numbers, if the hits, the hurries, the pressures, the TFLs are still really good. So in a way, you could say that maybe DeMarcus Lawrence got a little unlucky only to have 5.5 sacks. His numbers last year, those numbers, TFLs, hits, hurries, pressures, were comparable to a guy that we all regard as one of the best pass rushers in the NFL in Khalil Mack. Some of his numbers were better than Mack's, and a few were a little bit below Mack's, but they were certainly in the same ballpark. If you were to look at sets of numbers for nameless players last year, you would look at Khalil Mack's numbers and DeMarcus Lawrence's and say, hey, these fit in the same group. So, yeah, sacks are important. And, if he backs up his 5.5 sack season with another, then all right, now maybe we got an issue. But it wasn't like his overall year was bad or cause for concern yet. So just a few numbers here. This was shared in a Pro Football Focus article. So there were way more than 20 guys last year off the edge who were doubled at least 18% of the time. I think it was closer to 30. DeMarcus Lawrence was one of the most doubled players in the NFL. I think top 5. Only Robert Quinn, who maybe gets a little bit of a help because he's got DeMarcus Lawrence on the other side, and TJ Watt had a better win rate among those doubled more than 18% of the time. So against the double team, DeMarcus Lawrence's win rate, his ability to beat that protection was among the best in the NFL. And he had a better win rate overall than Zadarius Smith and Joey Bosa and Nick Bosa, who all are regarded very highly as effective pass rushers. So, sacks sometimes also are a reflection of the quarterback. We think so much about the offensive line, and the offensive line plays a role, but a lot of times sacks follow a quarterback. So when a quarterback goes team to team, the sack numbers tend to stay the same because a lot of it has to do with their ability to read coverage and read pressure and, their ability to sense and feel the pocket and whether they hold onto the ball too much or not, their awareness. So sacks a lot of times are maybe a reflection on the quarterback too, just as much as the O-line or even the line that quarterback is facing. So, another thing, how about DeMarcus Lawrence's ability to get to the quarterback quickly within 2.5 seconds? That is your pressure rate. And the thought is that after 2.5 seconds, that's how maybe coverage can help create a sack, or the quarterback, helps create a sack. 2.5 seconds or less, the thought is that the D-line creates this, that there's not much the quarterback can do. The coverage within 2.5 seconds really hasn't created a coverage sack. DeMarcus Lawrence was top 3 in pressure rate, in that his the pass rushing attempts versus the ability for him to get to the quarterback in 2.5 seconds or less, top 3 in the NFL. That's not a QB issue. That is a quality of a D lineman. So, again, summary. Was DeMarcus Lawrence as good last year as he had been? No, because finishing plays and finishing sacks is definitely necessary. It absolutely is necessary. That's like a quarterback making all the perfect reads, but just missing his throws, or maybe throwing it to the back hip so that it eliminates the receiver's ability to get some yards after the catch because it turns him around. But DeMarcus Lawrence is still doing a lot of things that are incredibly effective. He's still a good edge. Let's hope that he can get more than 5.5 sacks this year, because if he backs it up, well, now maybe we raise some concern. But I don't think there should be concern for DeMarcus Lawrence because of some of those stats that I provided there the last couple minutes. All right, what about CeeDee Lamb? All right, a lot of us are excited about CeeDee Lamb. And listen, he's an exciting first-round pick. We didn't think he'd be available where the Cowboys were drafting, all that stuff. Great college career. How does he improve the Cowboys? Well, is he, filling Randall Cobb's slot in the slot? In a way, yes. In a way, no. I mean, he's not going to be limited to just what Randall Cobb did. But yeah, I mean, I guess if Randall Cobb was the third receiver last year, CeeDee Lamb, I guess as of now, is the third receiver, although some people, myself included, think that he might emerge as the number 2. Michael Gallup, though, is not a guy that you're probably going to put in the slot a ton. He just doesn't have the same skill set. But CeeDee Lamb might very quickly emerge as your second best receiver this year, and I know some people think that he could be your best receiver this year. I'm not there yet with him. He's more dynamic than Randall Cobb. He's got more speed, and he's definitely more versatile in his usage. Randall Cobb's a guy who you're gonna hit with some intermediate routes, and hope that he can maybe make some plays with his feet. He used to be a lot better at that when he was early in his career with Green Bay, but Randall Cobb doesn't have CeeDee Lamb's dynamic ability. He doesn't have his speed. And CeeDee Lamb last year had 24 catches of at least 40 yards. That's more than one per game. He can be a threat downfield. He can be a threat right at the line, with kind of the screen game. And then he can be a threat everywhere in between. He's got that versatility. Not every receiver, not every great receiver can beat you at all 3 levels. And that's okay. That's a rare skill set. He's 6'2", and he can play outside, but, the thought is that you don't want to spend a lot of time with him outside because it limits his lateral ability, which is such a strength of his. So that's probably why you'll see him lined up in the slot a little bit more. Not to say he can't play outside, but you don't always want that sideline to be right there to limit, his lateral threat, essentially. A big question for CeeDee Lamb, because let's not put this guy in the Hall of Fame just yet. He played in the Big 12, okay, and the Big 12 is not known for their defense. And he played for Oklahoma, which is an offense that is known for putting guys in a position to put up big numbers. All right, there have been some receivers recently who have put up big numbers who maybe haven't taken a similar type of leap at this level. D.D. Westbrook is one, but CeeDee Lamb's skill set is better than D.D. Westbrook's, so that's really merely a laundry comparison more than anything else. But the question, I think, for CeeDee Lamb, when you look at the defenses he played, is how will he do against press coverage? He did not face press coverage a ton in college, and that's one reason why maybe putting him in the slot is best, because you typically don't see press coverage as much in the slot as you would outside. But in those situations, how does he do with contact early on? How does he do with the physical nature that the NFL brings that maybe the college game doesn't bring, especially with the way Big 12 defenses have been playing the last few years? So that's a fair question for CeeDee Lamb, and one that's worth monitoring, but not one that's worth losing sleep over just yet. So that's how I think CeeDee Lamb improves the Cowboys: the versatility, the ability to eat in the slot, but also play outside. When he breaks off his route, the ability to turn left, turn right, angle left, angle right, stop on a dime. The fact that you got to worry about him right when the ball is snapped at the line, and that you also have to worry about a double move or him beating you deep. I mean, he can beat you at all 3 levels, and that's a rare combination for a receiver. All right, last thing I want to touch on today, Mike McCarthy. What sort of an impact is he going to make? Well, I'll tell you, as someone who has watched Green Bay Packers football for some reason so closely the last several years and hasn't missed a Packers game in quite a while, I'll tell you that Mike McCarthy was really good in his first few years with the Packers, was seen as creative and different, and I think maybe what some people said is that time has caught up or did catch up to Mike McCarthy. I think what I'd say is that maybe the last few years he just got complacent with his system. His system became predictable, and I think that maybe, I don't want to call it a stubbornness, but the guy had won a Super Bowl. He had so much success. It wasn't like there was a ton of reason for him to mix things up. And a lot of people say that, there's a reason why people don't stick around as a head coach for a decade a lot of the time. And Mike McCarthy had a tremendous run, but sometimes your voice gets stale and sometimes your ideas get stale in an area. And I think that was probably the case. I think that year off was helpful. And I listen, it could just be all hogwash. It could just be talk. But I do love the fact that Mike McCarthy and others have shared what he did last year. He took a year to reset and just totally reevaluate his philosophies, what's important to him, kind of do an audit of where the NFL is, especially in the offensive side, which is more his specialty. I'm curious to see what changes and updates he'll make. The fact that he's willing to do that, or at least says that he's been doing that, is a great sign for a coach that maybe this time around is not going to be stubborn and is going to be more willing. The other thing too that we need to assess with the Packers is that Ted Thompson was not really helping out as the GM. He was dealing with some health things, and there are a lot of stories about maybe where the front office dropped the ball and maybe didn't supply Mike McCarthy with the best personnel either offensively or even defensively. So, my thought is that Mike McCarthy is effective right away. I'm curious year 5, year 7, if he's around then, where he's at and is he still able to evolve with the way the NFL evolves during that time. But I am excited about where he is. He is a no-nonsense guy. If you're expecting a guy with a world of personality, or at least outwardly to the media, you might be looking at for the wrong guy. But I think he's a no-nonsense guy who does seem to do a pretty good job of letting his guys do their job on the staff. He did have a little bit of a power struggle calling plays in Green Bay, but that was only when things were starting to slip offensively. And we'll see how that dynamic with Mike McCarthy and Kellen Moore plays out. There you go. That's our conversation for today. Again, I'd really appreciate if you would subscribe to the page, like, comment. I'd love to interact with you. Remember, got the interview with Brian Broaddus coming up in a bit, and just hanging with the nosebleed seats as well. Talk to you soon.